question. If anybody knows how all of this worked together, I'd love it if they contacted me. And I just, felt all kinds of energy come up about that, because that's the point. So just like we wouldn't put a decoration inside our oven, a lot of these passageways underneath aren't likely to have the tablets, okay? Full stop. When you said flying machines and spaceships, there was a lintel that fell off recently off a temple of above at the Temple of Abydos.
And I've seen that I've seen that tablet. If that's the same one you're talking about,
I
absolutely incredible.
It's incredible, but think about it. There was something put over the top of it that then had more recent hieroglyphics. So what this lends itself to is the idea that we need to look at dynastic Egypt from 3113 BC until it ended in Cleopatra's time as the patriarchal part of Egypt. And then there were matriarchal cultures all over the world, and this is the subject matter of my book. I did many, many years of research on that. And so we have to look at epochs of time that go farther and farther and farther back. So if we tend to think, because ancient Egypt is the most ancient that we tend to know about, that we talk about, but the part that we're looking at is the recent part of Egypt. So they had different stages of corruption and less spirituality, and you understand what I'm saying. Sure. And so in order to understand this story, I think we need to establish a much, much longer timeline. So having said that, when you look in Abydos, the Egyptians themselves had covered up those flying machines, and then you've got people saying that they were hieroglyphic embedded on top of another one, and they were various kings' inscriptions. Well, really, that's not what they look like. You know what they look like. They look like a helicopter. They look like flying machines.
Submarines, everything.
Okay, so you're right that the flying machines, the secrets of biology and how we got here, the star maps and all of that were within the secrets of the Egyptians. But it's not hidden in the oven. It's hidden in plain sight.
Right.
And what's underneath is another secret.
Carmen, does this tell you that there was an ET visitation or a number of visitations from above?
Well, you know Graham Hancock in his book Supernatural. He says we don't need extraterrestrials to explain any of this. We need interterrestrials. Okay, he talks about the altered states of consciousness that led to visions, and he talks about therianthropes, which are half animal and half human. Well, when we put the spin on it, we say the Egyptians were obsessed with death and they worshipped animals. But that's not what we're looking at, okay? So, I mean, it's a big question, and I'm not willing to step out and say they were or they weren't here in visitations. And you've had enough to do with UFOs to say, well, they are here, and some people have seen them. And when you're lying in your bed and you've been abducted, maybe you had an inner journey and you came back with scars. I mean, we get confused inside the semantics of what we're talking about. I think that when they talk about conversations with the elders or the wise ones, they talk about connections to Sirius and Osiris, and that has to do with Orion and Isis and all of that. I got those backwards, but you know what I mean. Isis and Osiris representing Sirius and Orion. To what extent? And we talk about channeled work and remote viewing and all of that. So there's a way to paint this picture where something that is outside of three-dimensional physical reality can exist if we expand our consciousness. Okay, but we've got a big taboo about that sort of thing.
Sure do.
And
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that the Egyptians obviously cultivated altered states of consciousness deliberately, and they learned how to navigate the bardos. So when it came time for death, they didn't get all surprised. They knew how to consciously go. So weaving all of this into the way they lived, they also knew how to depart. And so what I'm trying to do here is explain it in a way where we can understand them, but they were well versed in out-of-body experiences and consciousness.
Do you believe that the way the Egyptians handled death, though they never really talked about death per se, convinces us today that there is a hereafter.
Absolutely. Well, when you go into the Valley of the Kings, the inscriptions on the walls that no one's allowed to take pictures of are giving the map of the bardos. They're explaining what happens. Now, why they kept their organs and put them into perfume jars and the canopic jars, and how they decorated their tombs wasn't the idea that they were going to reincarnate and go find their tomb and get their stuff. I mean, we think of them as misguided and infantile and kind of a little off, right? But there were reasons for this, because if the physical body was attended to, the old physical body was attended to, the ka, the spirit body, the ba, would be free to roam and choose a new incarnation at will. And so they weren't forced to come back unnecessarily. And, you know, you've talked about ghosts and all kinds of things where it's a lower level soul where things didn't end well and they're trapped. And that's not the same thing as a high-level ascended master channeled being. You understand what I'm saying? And so they were trying to allow themselves to navigate these other realms and then reincarnate in a way that would progress them in terms of levels of consciousness.
Did you come across anything that would have backed up the work of Zecharia Sitchin in his work with Sumerian tablets?
Well, yes, and I've met Sitchin. And now the thing is that there's, and again, Coast is a wonderful forum for exploring a lot of these things, and there are scholars since that have looked at little syntactical differences in the way that Zecharia Sitchin interpreted grammar in the Sumerian text that slightly change how it's interpreted. But he was basically talking about the wars of gods and men. And this is far out stuff. And hardly anybody has tackled what Sitchin has tackled. And it seems to float in its own little, pocket. You understand what I mean by that, I'm sure. That how do we take the idea of the Nephilim and reptilian race and, the wars of gods and men out there and how it affected us here? Well, personally, and it fits into the visions I've had as well, let's imagine that the Golden Age was in full swing. We're in, how the processional cycle works, every 13,000 years. So we're in the deepest, densest, darkest, ready to turn the corner back up into the next Golden Age. So every 13,000 years we go down, and 13,000 we go up. And then 26,000 years added to that, so 39,000 years ago, we would have been at a peak Golden Age. And so let's imagine we were in full swing and the energy machines were working and people had high levels of consciousness and senses of peace and all of that. And then something happens and we're taken over by a darker force that overcharges the machines. And like if you go into the Great Pyramid and the Pyramids of Dashur, you'll see these incredible cracks inside. And it would have taken a huge force. Well, I don't think if everything was going along as it should in the Golden Age, the interruption would have happened in a way that would have destroyed or hurt, not completely destroyed, but damaged the energy system. And so, yes, I think that something happened that was evil, if you will, that affected something that probably was quite peaceful. Now, if I was going to describe that, I would probably not make a documentary series, but I would make a feature film that was more speculative, and we would paint a story that seemed more like a fantasy, because we can't prove that, right?
Oh, I want to get into your pyramid code when we come back at the top of the hour, Carmen, and some of the other work that you've been doing. This has been a lifelong effort for you, hasn't it?
It sure has.
No end in sight?
Oh, actually, you know what? I feel pretty satisfied now. Now that it's all on DVD and tiny little packages and edited, I feel quite complete, to tell you the truth.
Finally.
Yeah.
All right, well, stay with us. We're going to be back with Dr. Carmen Boulter in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Her website, pyramidcode.com. Carmen, when you were in Egypt, did you see, at least around the pyramids, what could have been construed as incredible wealth during